This show is part of the RetroZap.com podcast network.
Now, prepare yourselves for Starships, Sabers, and Scoundrels Special Edition. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Greetings, Scoundrels, and welcome to episode 65.3, the Scoundrels Special Edition. I'm Dennis, and I'm joined tonight by my friend and co-host, Jay Krebs. Jay, how are you doing tonight?
Hey, Dennis. I'm doing great tonight, and can't wait to talk about another episode of Resistance. So this is great.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting. Our other co-host, Star Taxis, continues to be really busy and sends his regrets that he can't join us for our discussion. However, we are working hard on our next regular episode, 66, which we've dubbed Execute Episode 66, and that is also our annual Halloween Spectacular. And we're having a really good time putting that one together, so I hope you all enjoy that when it comes out in just a couple weeks. But with that, let's kind of get into what's going on here. If you are new to the show, you may be asking, what is a Scoundrel Special Edition? And to that I say, good question. On our Scoundrel Special Editions, we forego many of our usual features, such as the news and our skits, to focus on a specific piece of content. Tonight, we're discussing the second episode of Resistance, which is entitled The Triple Dark. Okay, fair warning, Scoundrels. This is a full spoiler discussion, so if you haven't watched this episode, then you're listening at your own peril. So, before I get into the details here, Jay, what was your overall impression of this episode?
Well, from our last Scoundrel Special Edition, when we did the debut of the Recruit, I really felt like there was a lot of potential in this show, and I do still feel that way, but I'm kind of left a little, I don't know if the word is disappointed necessarily, but I'm just not as into the Resistance episodes as I guess I had hoped that I would be. There's still a lot of great elements to enjoy, and there's still going to be something to get out of every single one of them. But yeah, I'm still kind of, reserving a lot of my feelings for maybe some upcoming episodes to see how they play out.
Yeah, I hear you and I agree with you. What occurred to me today when I was putting together some notes for this discussion is that I am not necessarily looking forward to episode 3 as much as I was looking forward to the third episode of Rebels or the third episode of the Clone Wars. And maybe it is that they're really going to focus on a younger audience, and that's fine. Not all Star Wars content has to be for me. But with this being kind of the major Star Wars content at the moment, I would just kind of hope it was something that I found more appealing, which I feel like is not an unfair thing to say. But with that out of the way, let's kind of get into this episode. So we find ourselves with Kaz back on Colossus Station, and he's eager to get on with his spying mission. However, Yeager has him busy doing repairs for a Neimoidian named Halion, who has brought his classic Clone Wars era Separatist shuttle in, which needs repairs, and he's in a hurry. He's got his quick turnaround. So I will say that I do like that, even though this episode is set just 6 months prior to The Force Awakens, we have some prequel era content tied into that.
Yes, I appreciate that too, definitely. And that's what I was saying about some of the elements that I definitely appreciate seeing to kind of tie things in. And I'm wondering if those are put in almost specifically for our type of audience. You know what I mean? Sure. To kind of dangle that little carrot in front of us and say, hey, look, we're showing you this. So, yeah. But yeah, it was a great thing to see. And of course, there's some other things in here too that we'll get to.
Right, and the other thing I liked is this Neimoidian, he kind of defied the convention of the Neimoidians that we're used to from the prequels. He was, they were typically, like Rune Hako and Latdad and all them, these skinnier guys with these long, thin necks, whatever. This guy was a bit on the chubbier side. He didn't have the normal noble regalia that the other guys had. So I guess he's kind of a lower functionary in the International Banking Clan, the Techno Union, or whatever branch he belongs to, or if those things even exist anymore. So just a little bit of diversity. I find, these shows kind of where they succeed is when they kind of turn these conventions on their head from time to time.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I didn't even place him as a Nemoidian at first.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had to think about that one for a little while, and yeah, you're absolutely right, and it's kind of interesting because it's almost as well. I think I want to say, oh shoot, what was the planet that Obi-Wan went to where Order 66 was eventually? Wow. Yes, and there were two different types of Udapans. There was the upper class and the lower class. So I was kind of wondering, as you said, if maybe he was of a different class of Nemoidian.
Quite possibly. He could have been from some worker class like Cater Nemoidia, but we'll find out. So Yeager tasks Kaz with repairing his ship, with of course Tam, Nico, and Bucket's help on this, and he's really stressing to Kaz that this is an important client, it's a quick turnaround, you need to get to work. And not long after, he then sends Kaz to get a part from acquisitions. I can't remember what part that is, and it's really inconsequential. But this creates some delays. Kaz gets sidetracked trying to spy on the various people on Colossus Station. He's got BB-8 with him, and he tells them this is the perfect time to start spying. Before I get too much further, I don't know about you, but two things happened that I kind of found cringeworthy, to borrow a phrase that used in some of the communications you and I have prior to recording this. One, Nico getting electrocuted because Kaz wasn't paying enough attention and gave him the wrong part. It's one thing to get a shock. We saw that happened to Han when repairing the Falcon, when Chewbacca did something he wasn't supposed to do. But it was the whole spastic movements, him flying up in the air. It seems something like straight out of Looney Tunes.
Yes, thank you. Yes, and you know what, you pulled that right out of my head too, because that's kind of the generalized feeling that I get from Resistance, and I know I'm probably going to get a bunch of rotten Shura fruit thrown at me, but I feel like it's a Looney Tunes Saturday morning cartoon. There's a lot of slapstick, there's a lot of nonsense, there's a lot of, and I know that we're in the Star Wars universe, so I mean, yeah, it's all fiction, but I mean, it's not even believable Star Wars in some ways. It's almost gratuitous to, you know what I mean? And I hate that I feel that way, because there definitely are some really good elements, as we said, in the show. But yeah, I just feel like you said, it's very cringeworthy. So yeah, that whole shocking element, and just Kaz being overly sensitive to, he was like hyper stimulated all the time. Oh, is this a spy? Oh, is this a spy?
Yeah.
Everybody that was talking, all of a sudden they're a spy. So
not only that, he's creeping down the middle of the alley on Colossus Station, like no one's going to see him do that, and you think it's odd.
It's very Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, well, in the middle of broad daylight. It was just kind of, what are you doing, Kaz? This just didn't make, I get it. They've Lucasfilm and Disney XD and the producers of the show have kind of changed the track that they've been promoting the show with. Initially, they were saying it was aimed at 8-year-olds, and then they were saying it was aimed at kids of all ages from 8 to 70 or whatever you may be. And no, I'm sorry, and I hate to sound super negative at this part, because there are things about this episode I didn't like, but that type of thing is not appealing, especially when you consider that we're supposed to take this seriously as part of the Star Wars canon, that what happens here matters. And then we have this goofball who was supposed to be an agent of the Resistance, he doesn't know how to be a spy. The other thing he doesn't know how to do is be a mechanic.
No, and that's blatantly obvious.
Yeah, but Yeager still insists that he goes fix the ship.
Right,
and,
right.
So Kaz is keeping it under wraps that he's not this really trained mechanic, that he's self-taught, is what he tells Tam, because she doesn't know that he's spying for the Resistance. And that's fine. It's just that you would think if Yeager was agreeing to take Kaz under his wing and kind of give him a place to stay while he's running this mission for the Resistance, he wouldn't be forcing on him work that he knows he's not capable of doing. So I don't know. I'm not sure if that's a character movement, character issue I have, or a plot issue I have, or what exactly that is. But it seemed I don't know. Yeager's one of my two favorite characters on this show. But that whole insistence that, this is a quick turnaround, it's a very important client, go get that fixed. Well, Yeager, if it's so important, why are you not putting Tam in charge of all this?
Exactly. Exactly. And I felt the exact same way, because I thought, okay, if you are so worried about blowing this cover and, destroying everything that Poe is trying to do here, then why send Kaz, someone who is obviously not capable of doing this? I mean, that's the first thing they're going to figure out is this kid just does not belong here. One of these things is not like the other one,
exactly.
kind of. Yeah. So, and of course I appreciate some good humor in Star Wars. We always do. I mean, you and I and Darth Texas have talked about this before. I mean, we love the humor, when it's placed well. And, and even with Jar Jar Binks, and I'll be a Jar Jar apologist to the end, when he got shocked a little bit at the Boonta Eve Classic, when he got in between the couplings and whatnot, and his tongue went numb. I mean, that was funny, but I didn't feel that was gratuitous. And of course, a lot of people said that was catering to the young kids too, and how dumb was that? But yet it wasn't, for me at least, it wasn't completely over the top. And maybe it's just because of the fact that this is an animated series that it just feels more over the top. Maybe it's not. Maybe I'm reading more into it.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think?
No, it was definitely over the top. It was something, as I said earlier, it was kind of straight out of Looney Tunes, the way that they animated him. They were shocking and contorting and up in the air. I mean, Jar Jar got shocked, but, was all within the same space. It's not like he went flying around. Or he had the yellow shock lines all over him, and you could see his skeleton inside him or anything like that.
Good point.
Yeah, and this other issue with the spying, well, we'll move ahead a little bit because we've kind of lingered on this one point. But so Kaz is doing his spying, and then he comes across two guys talking about, I think it's some gambling that's going on, and he's not certain what he's hearing, so he's hiding behind some crates and eavesdropping on them, and then they eventually call him out, which leads to his nemesis on the station, Greville, that little alien that's got the teeth that cheated on him, cheated at darts with him in the cantina, comes across, and he's insisting that he gets paid for winning this bet that he cheated on. And so, he discovers this trophy that Kaz have that is made of
Erodium, I believe.
Erodium, yeah, which is a mineral that StarWars.com and the Buckets List said is rarer than gold, which was actually first mentioned in the Legends novel Rogue Planet, which I don't remember. I do remember reading that book, but I don't remember that coming up there.
Okay.
But it's so rare that this mineral is valuable enough that it would cover the 1,000 or 1,500 credit debt that Kaz has to this alien that cheated. And so, this kind of leads to a conflict, and it further delays him getting this part and getting back to Yeager and Tam. Now, I will say this. I kind of find Greville to be slightly on the annoying side. This obsession he has with catching up with Kaz for, not paying up on this debt that he cheated to acquire. But I did like the fact that Kaz was sticking up for himself. This is like his one prized possession, which he brought with him. It's something that he earned on his own, even though he had all this help with his dad. And when Greville tried to take it, he's like, no, that's mine. You're not taking that. So I did kind of like that moral that they were injecting into Resistance, which is, there are some things we're standing up for. What did you think?
Oh, yes, definitely. And, and things that are more valuable than Erodium or, more precious than gold in this case. And so it kind of makes you feel that, well, okay, if he's feeling this way about his trophy and he's more into what it means rather than what it is, then perhaps he'll feel the same way about his role in the Resistance as well. So, I mean, you could translate it that way, I suppose. So.
Sure. And this trophy comes up again next when he finally does make it to Acquisitions, and he's talking to Flix and Orca, which, quick refresher, Flix is the bird-like creature, and Orca is the Chadrafan character. And, they mentioned to him, it's like, you could sell this trophy and you'd have a lot of money and you could eat a whole lot better and live a whole lot better for at least, a month or so.
Yeah, a month or so, yeah.
But as you said, he won't part with it. That is a treasured possession. That is something that he earned, and he's going to hold on to it. So, again, I like that. He's not so down on his luck that he's willing to sacrifice that just yet. It's the one It's kind of the one thing he brought with him. You know, now it was a little odd at the beginning of this episode. He just pulls it out in the middle of the hangar while they're doing her repair. Like, you know, it's like, you know, like, this is where you choose to unpack. Okay, but so Tam catches up with him then and drags him back to the garage by his ear after he gets the part. But
that was a little weird too. I was like, okay, what is she trying to do here? Is she trying to prove that she's like his mom or what?
Well, I get where she's coming from, which was before he showed up, she was she still technically is the chief person in Yeager's garage, the chief mechanic that he has, and she was promised the Fireball as a ship if she could repair it.
Right.
And now Kaz comes in. There's no explanation. He's very shady on everything he does. He slows them down. And Yeager keeps insisting that he take an active part in repairs. I can understand her resentment, and I didn't mind so much her dragging him off because he's just not super forthcoming. It's so easy to see through the half-truths and the omissions that he makes when he's trying to explain where he comes from and what he's doing.
And again, you know, I get it was a comic relief kind of thing, but you could have just dragged him by the collar, you know, or something like that. So I just felt like it was a very motherly almost thing to do, you know, as she was punishing him. But
do you
works.
think that Tam fears that Kaz is taking advantage of Yeager, or and in that into you know, and then by extension, Niku and Bucket and the rest of them?
Well, I think she feels a little threatened, like you said, because who's this kid that just comes in and then, you know, all of a sudden kind of takes first center stage beyond everyone else. And then it's like, okay, well, what just happened to me? So I can see that she's probably got a lot of questions in her mind in terms of who this is and what his role is going to be. And so she's walking on eggshells a little bit, I think, too. And she's a little defensive.
Yeah. I like her an awful lot. She's
I do
one of my
too.
favorite characters in this show. She's very down to earth. Same with Yeager for the most part.
Yes.
My two favorites. But so they get back to the garage, and while working on repairs, Kaz overhears Hallian contacting someone named Kragan, and the term triple dark is prominently mentioned. You know, so Kaz is actually doing some real spy work there, you know, which is, I think, a lot more in this situation of him just keeping his ears open and listening than it is actively seeking out, you know, is this guy a spy? Is that guy a spy? It's kind of a, you know, keep your ears open, see what you hear, and then if something sounds suspicious, follow up on it. And so this is the first time, I mean, it's only been 2 episodes, the premiere in this is the first time I think that this show's really got the concept of spying right.
Yeah, at this point, definitely. I agree.
But it turns out the Triple Dark is a very fierce storm on, what is this planet called? Cantonian? And the pirates use it for cover to attack the Colossus Station, and Kragan happens to be the leader of the pirates. So when the pirates make their attack, Kaz is stranded outside on the Colossus Station. It's him and BB-8, and then Grubble shows up again with that axe to grind, and they kind of get stuck outside. What did you think of the pirates?
Well, you know, at first I felt like they were a little almost misplaced in a way, because you know, it wasn't really explained who their affiliation was or really what their goal was. They just said that they would attack, and I'm assuming then they mentioned about getting supplies and things like that. But realistically, I just felt like, oh, well, okay, I guess there's pirates all over the galaxy, and why not use a good storm as an excuse for cover and get whatever you can. So I guess I didn't really read too much into it.
No, this is more of a just general question. You know, I thought the pirates were pretty cool. As a matter of fact, I thought, you know, all their ships were modified versions of other ships. The one that Kragan was in was a Lambda cruiser, or some sort of a shuttle from the Empire that had been heavily modified. One of the ships they were using looked like it had the fuselage of an A-wing, but solar panels from a TIE Interceptor on it.
Okay.
there's, Taxis and I have always talked about in the past our affinity from some of the Legends stuff that, like the X-Wing game and stuff like that. And in those games and in some of the X-Wing books, I don't know if you've read those.
I have not, no.
Okay. Well, there was this concept that these mercenary groups would patch together ships and they'd call them uglies because they might have like the fuselage of an X-Wing but the solar panels of a TIE fighter, or the cockpit of a Y-Wing and the some other parts from, so they basically clobbered ships together from whatever they could find. And that's the feeling I got with this, is that they kind of patched these ships together and they were just cool. I really liked, and then they had a nice diverse crew. We had a Trandoshan, we had and I'm going to forget now, as soon as I try to describe who they are, I forget their names. The Miralon was there, but we had there was a Hosk character from The Force Awakens, but they had a nice diverse crew of pirates. I'm with you, the reason for the raid didn't really stand out, other than it seemed like it was an opportune time, that there was this storm coming in and provide great cover, and therefore they were going to do it. The other thing about the raid that I liked is we got a better look at Colossus Station. Did you notice the shield generators on the station?
Honestly, I did not. I don't know if I was just glaze-eyed over that scene, quite honestly, or what.
Your eye is drawn to the blasters that are next to
Maybe
the shield
that's
generation
why.
that's firing back, and I noticed this the second time around. It's the same shield generators that are on top of an Imperial Star Destroyer, is what was there. So I thought that was a nice touch. Resistance has done a very good job of incorporating Star Wars elements into it, whether it's the various alien species from all three trilogies, the blaster weapon. Greville shows up with a Geonosian blaster rifle when he threatens Kaz when this is going on. But they've done a good job of incorporating all these elements from various areas of Star Wars. And so I just like that. That was a nice touch. What about this concept that the ace pilots were the fighter defenders of the base? What did you think about that?
Oh, yeah. Well, in some ways, I feel like that makes sense. You know what I mean? Because if they're going to be the ace, the best pilots, then why not be the defenders as well? So,
yeah, I guess my concern about this is that it seems a little 80s to me that we have these elite racers that happen to double as the defense force.
I see what you're saying. Yep.
Yeah, and okay, so what is really their job? What is their goal? What is their aim? Why are they here on Colossus Station? Is it to defend the? Are they hired to defend the station? And that may be the case. Are they there as racers, or is it some combination? That I'm having a hard time with establishing what the world building goals, I guess, are of Resistance with Colossus Station.
Oh, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Thank you. Because it's just kind of okay, it's a refueling station. We know that it's out there on the Outer Rim or Wild Space or wherever it's supposed to be, in the middle of nowhere. And, that's why Poe sent Kaz there to do some spying. But it's just kind of why is everyone so interested in it? We'll get to the First Order in a bit. But, But be that as it may, it's just kind of there's some logic here that's just escaping me at the moment. And I'm hoping that as we get through some more episodes that we'll get that figured out. I just don't feel like we ever had that problem with the Clone Wars or with Rebels. Right. It's like, is this a diamond in the rough kind of thing? Are we going to have some kind of big reveal? Because, you're right. There's a lot of great things about it, but yet what's its role? Right. Like you said, the whole world building thing is kind of a big question mark. Yeah. So Kaz and Greville are trapped outside on the station while the pirates are attacking, and they make a dash to get inside. Kaz successfully makes it, but it becomes apparent that as I don't know if they're blast doors or protection doors or what are closing, that Greville is not going to make it. He's pleading for Kaz to do something. So, calling back to his trophy, Kaz sticks that in between the doors to jam them long enough so that Greville can get in, and it kind of smashes his trophy a little bit. So, he sacrifices. It's kind of they almost like put a big flashing arrow around this, like building moment. Very symbolic. Indeed. He sacrifices his prized possession to save an enemy, so we have some idea of what Kaz's character is on this episode. I don't know. Did that Did you have any type of feelings one way or the other on that?
Yeah, it was, again, and I mentioned this about the first episode too. There's very forces of destiny type feelings in some of these scenes where, I feel like they could be used, as you said, almost like a moral lesson in some ways.
Uh-huh.
So
Right. So, Greville gets saved and he runs off. And then Kaz makes this observation that the ace pilots are outnumbered, which I did the math and that didn't seem to be the case. I thought there were like 4 or 5 pirates and then there was 4 or 5 aces. So I wasn't sure why the odds were such a big deal there. But at any rate, as that aside, he decides he has to do something. Well, when he had overheard Hallion earlier, he startled him and Hallion dropped his comlink. Well, so BB-8 manages to fish it out of a crevice that it's sitting in and gives it to Kaz, and he uses some feedback that they had that came up earlier in the episode to basically jam the pirates and drive them off.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this bugged me quite a bit. Before I get into my reasons why, and I probably should ask you your opinion first, but what did you think about it?
Yeah, it was a little sketchy. I felt like that one didn't really fit. I don't know.
Well, it seemed to call back to an old cartoon trope. I'm thinking of cartoons like Mask and maybe G.I. Joe and whatever, where Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Transformers, whatever, some of these old 80s cartoons where if they could only find the right frequency, they could shut down the enemy. And so he finds a comlink and he sends some feedback through it. And it kind of jams their signals, and then they start suffering damage and they have to flee. Okay, I mean, so Kaz stepped in. He figured something out. That's great. He's clever, but it seemed like I don't want to use the phrase cop out because that's not quite right and it's not quite fair. It just seemed too convenient, and I'm not sure it's the type of thing I wanted introduced into Star Wars right now.
Well, I almost get the feeling in some ways, we're talking about all these 80s feels and that type of thing. And of course, we've already said that this is inspired by Japanese anime in a lot of ways. So it's almost like you wonder if it's part of the style that they're working in and almost working in some of these 80s feels for maybe the parents that are watching, possibly. Like, oh yeah, I remember stuff like that,
Right. And maybe that is. And, I've heard other people talk about this series so far, and not everyone. There's been plenty of people who liked it who don't have children, but I find the people that are really enjoying it have younger children, and this is kind of a step into Star Wars for them. And I get that appeal, and that's fantastic. And I'm not saying I dislike this series. It's not living up to my expectations at the moment.
Right.
But
right. Same
so,
here.
With that aside, the pirates have been driven off. Kaz goes back to repairing the ship, and he manages to get this part installed. He even did some work on the Fireball, which proves to be short-lived. He did it so that, obviously he's making some progress as a mechanic. And it's kind of this whole fitting in moment that he has with everybody else in the garage. But then we get this shot of Kragan and the pirates talking to the First Order over a holo transmission. And this is our introduction to Captain Phasma for the series.
Yes.
Which was very cool to see. And she's not impressed with the pirates whatsoever. But you get the feeling that they've set up, and I kind of mentioned this in the last time you and I talked about Resistance, was they're setting up that there's something going on with Colossus that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
They're just not telling us what it is, because it's got the pirates' intention, it's got the First Order's interest, but so it's subtly teasing that there's something going on with Colossus Station.
Exactly, and that's where the idea of the diamond in the rough kind of comes from for me. So, but yeah, how great was that to see Phasma and hear Gwendolyn Christie's voice?
Yeah, she looked great. I haven't really had a problem with the animation style. My one critique is that the characters frequently look like they are drawn on top of a background, as opposed to the camera moves with the characters so much. It's not entirely fair to say, but I feel like the characters stand apart from the background more than the characters in Rebels or Clone Wars ever stood out from the backgrounds in those shows. But that may just be a function of the way they animate the show. So, well, let's get into a few other aspects of the show. One of the things that I alluded to earlier was that I'm not as excited for the third episode of Resistance as I remember being at the time for the third episode of Rebels, and that got me thinking about Kaz comparing him to Ezra. And if my memory serves, the second episode of Rebels was the episode in which they run into R2-D2 and C-3PO. If it wasn't the second, it was a third. It was fairly early on. And Ezra, he kind of uses some of his skills as a street rat, so to speak, on Lothal to help them get into places, and he uses that sling he has. He exhibits his skills and helps them get on that shuttle, and they go through that whole charade where he calls C-3PO an astromech because Chopper's acting up. It's all part of the ruse to get take control of that shuttle and things like that. I felt like that was a fine example of how you get this new misfit character to fit in with the crew that he's working in. Mm-hmm. And by comparison, Kaz is still just sticking out like a sore thumb.
Oh, yeah. I totally agree. And at least I feel like with Ezra, his skills were definitely more usable and believable, I guess you could say. He was more worldly to begin with, and maybe that's just a product of Kaz's upbringing too, with having a father as a senator, and you kind of get the feeling that he's sort of been handed things his whole life because his father basically came right out and said so. So, he's got a different personality, and it's a whole different upbringing, so maybe that has something to do with it. I'm trying to give him the benefit of the doubt,
Sure. I think you're on something there, though, Jen.
I just feel like they're two different characters altogether. I really do.
Yeah. Well, and then there's a good contrast that you just brought up, and that Kaz kind of comes from a position of privilege, that his dad was able to get him into the academy, was able to get him into the Republic Navy, so to speak, as a fighter pilot, was able to get him into all these things, and he throws it back in Kaz's face, whereas Ezra's parents haven't been around for a long time. He got separated from them when he was very young, and he was left to fend for himself. And so he's developed these skills. And so when Ezra needs to spy and get someplace, he knows how to do it without looking like a clown.
Absolutely. He's much more stealthy, and he's had so much more practice at it.
Much more streetwise on top of that.
Definitely.
Kaz has the best of intentions, and he doesn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. We saw that in the first episode when he inadvertently offended Niku, which led him to agreeing to do a race, that got him, ended up with him crashing, and that, so he's gradually making these inroads into this community that's on Colossus Station, but he hasn't quite got there yet. So did anything else about this episode stand out to you?
Well, I loved the whole appearance of Phasma, and I do feel like there's a lot of, I kept thinking, okay, what is this with these pirates, and what is this connection? And of course, my mind immediately goes to Crimson Dawn and all of these different crime syndicates that employ pirates, and kind of the people that are out on the fringe. So I suppose the First Order may not be any different, but yet I feel like, okay, are these really pirates? But then the way that you describe their ships is very much almost like a Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, and it also kind of reminds me too of Enfys Nest. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe there's some merit to the fact that these pirates are being employed, but again, I'm looking for ways to, I hate to say it, but make me buy into the show just a little bit more.
Yeah, and that's fair. Part of me wants to cut. I watched the next episode. That's not an issue. It's just that I'm expecting more out of these episodes, and I remember back at the beginning of Clone Wars, there was the growing pains with everyone, coming to like Ahsoka, and then with Rebels, there were in some corners there was some backlash against Ezra essentially being Aladdin, and so but these characters end up growing everyone, and I fully expect Kaz will continue to grow on me as we go, and I hope he continues to mature, and he did a little bit during this episode, with him learning how to. Not necessarily, to maybe, I'm not even sure, I'm not sure exactly how I want to phrase this, but, he thought about it, he analyzed the situation, and I'm really hoping that over the course of this episode, he learned the difference between this clumsy form of spying, active spying he was trying to do, as opposed to being a good operative, which is, keeping your, maintain your cover, keeping an ear open, and when you find when you come across something that needs to be investigated, then going after it, as opposed, keeping your ears open for the clues. Because, it was the one thing that Hallian said earlier. He heard him he overheard him talking about the triple dark, and someone named Kragan. And then, later in the episode, he's like, that triple dart came up again. Was that Rodian was coming like, hey, kid, you need to find shelter. We got triple dart coming. And he's like, that's the second time I've heard that today. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was a good element of storytelling. It was more effective for him to act as a spy than this clumsy method he had earlier, which was just, and I guess I should be a little bit empathetic with the creators of the show. It's like, how do you show someone being a lousy spy who has no idea what they're doing? And I guess that might be how you did it. It just seemed a little exaggerated.
It did. And it's obviously he wants to please, and it's almost like he wants to please too much, though, in some ways, that he needs to learn, like you said, the subtleties of being an effective spy instead of just being completely over the top. And he has no training. I mean, let's face it, he really has no training. Poe just grabbed him because he thought he was an awesome pilot, and yet he has no other merits besides that. So, yeah, I think there's still a lot of question marks out there for Kaz, but hopefully we'll get some of those answered.
Yeah. I guess the other thing that I liked about this episode was that when we did see the ace pilots take off, we had more exposure to them than we did in the premiere of this. And so I don't even know all their names yet. Of course, Tora
Doza.
Doza, thank you.
The only reason I know that for a fact is because I took that quiz online through StarWars.com, and I'm Tora Doza. So.
Okay.
That's what I was told.
Yeah, so Tora Doza was there. Phaeton was there. There was the old Imperial pilot, and then there was a woman who did the voice of Governor Price. Was in that group. So we kind of had a bit more exposure to them as they were flying off and fighting the pirates, which is cool. Because we just haven't been introduced formally to all those characters yet. So that was good to see. All right. Well, that I think will do it for our look at the second episode of Resistance, which is Triple Dark. Before we go, you have anything else going on for the Scoundrels to look out for, Jay?
Well, as always, you can try to catch some of my fashion review blogs over on Coffee with Kenobi for my Core Worlds Couture column. I've got some things in the works right now. Life has just kind of gotten in the way, and so hopefully I'll be getting some of those out soon. But you can always follow me on Twitter at Joyce Krebs, where even if I don't get a blog out, at least I'm posting pictures and unboxing videos and that type of thing. So you can check me out there.
Yep, those are always fun to watch. Thanks. So as for myself, you can find my current comic reviews, which include Star Wars number 55 and the first issue of the Han Solo adaptation, which I'll put a little plug in for real quick. I read that earlier today when we were recording this, and it's really good. It's really fun. I kind of like the fact that they used a slightly lighter color palette for these opening scenes of the movie, so you can get a better idea of what's going on. But if you're looking for a fun comic read, the first issue of the Solo adaptation was really good. And other than that, you can find me each month on Jedi Journals. I do a comic discussion with Josel J. Shepard. And then, well, I'll plug Taxis here, and then there's something relevant going on there. But you can, of course, find him each week on The Geek Supreme with Scott Murray, Jeff McGee, and Regina Davis. Jeff McGee is not going to make it to their Halloween episode, and a certain other scoundrel might be taking his place.
Hey!
For the episode, so you can look forward to us on that next week. But if you want to find us on social media, we are SQPod on Twitter and Instagram, and on Facebook, you can find us at facebook.com/SQPod. You can email the show at sqpod@retrozap.com. You can follow Darth Taxis on Twitter at Darth Taxis. Jay is at Joyce Krebs, and I am at DJKVER2. Speaking of RetroZap, we are proud part of the RetroZap Podcast Network. The network currently features more than a dozen shows covering everything from retro gaming and movies to the Animaniacs, collecting, Dune, Game of Thrones, and of course a whole lot of Star Wars. So you can subscribe to the network feed and you'll get every episode. So that's going to do it for the Scoundrels Special Edition. We'll talk to you all soon with another edition of Starships, Sabers, and Scoundrels. Until then, may the Force be with you.